Do not dismiss what you have been sensing lately, because the emotional atmosphere surrounding this day is anything but ordinary. Within the next 24 hours, something may emerge that has the power to redirect the future of your romantic life in ways that seem impossible to predict. For many people, today will appear no different from any other Monday. It will look like another routine date on the calendar, another sunrise followed by familiar responsibilities. Yet beneath that ordinary surface, an extraordinary process has been unfolding for months. And today, July 13th, marks the moment when that invisible tension reaches its highest point. Whether you realize it yet or not, a hidden fault line inside your relationships has been gathering pressure. The way you understand love, the emotions you carry inside your heart, even the image you hold of the person standing beside you, may suddenly shift. The unsettling truth is that almost no one recognizes these turning points before they arrive. That is the nature of this cosmic energy. It works beneath awareness until the instant everything changes. At this very moment, while you are listening, an exceptionally powerful celestial pattern is moving into exact alignment. Many astrologers have described this as one of the most unstable relationship transits of the entire year. This is not the universe offering a gentle reminder or a subtle lesson. It resembles a powerful tremor, shaking the deepest foundations of what once felt dependable. If you have recently experienced an unusual sense of emotional uneasiness, as though something inside your relationship has been quietly vibrating beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself, there is an important reason for that sensation. Later, I will explain exactly why those feelings have become stronger with each passing day, because once you understand the source, many confusing experiences may suddenly make sense. Before we reach that point, however, it is essential to recognize that this story did not begin today. By the time this morning arrived, you were already standing inside an energetic storm that has been forming throughout the entire week. Human beings often believe dramatic life changes happen without warning. One day everything appears calm, and the next day life feels completely transformed. Yet the universe rarely operates that way. What appears sudden is usually the final visible moment of a much longer process. Invisible emotional layers accumulate one after another. Pressure quietly increases until the smallest movement becomes enough to create a breakthrough. That is exactly what has been happening throughout this week. The intensity has not appeared overnight. It has been steadily growing beneath ordinary conversations, familiar routines, and unnoticed emotional reactions. The process truly accelerated on July 9th, when Venus, the planet associated with love, attraction, emotional connection, and personal values, entered Virgo. That single shift altered the emotional landscape surrounding relationships. The atmosphere that had recently been filled with romance, dramatic expressions, and passionate displays began changing almost immediately. Love stopped asking how deeply someone could speak about their feelings and started asking how consistently they could demonstrate them through everyday actions. Instead of grand romantic gestures, attention turned toward ordinary responsibilities. Everyday routines suddenly carried unexpected emotional weight. Washing dishes, paying bills on schedule, remembering important commitments, organizing daily life, and quietly supporting one another became more meaningful than beautiful words or exciting promises. If you have recently wondered why your relationship feels less romantic than it did only days ago, or why the emotional excitement seems to have been replaced by practical concerns and constant responsibilities, your intuition has not been misleading you. This is one of the defining expressions of Venus moving through Virgo. Under this influence, devotion is measured less by emotional intensity and more by reliability. Affection reveals itself through consistency rather than dramatic excitement. Love becomes visible through thoughtful service instead of endless passion. Yet every astrological influence carries both light and shadow, and this is where the deeper challenge begins. Venus in Virgo does not simply observe the small details inside a relationship. It evaluates them. It analyzes them. It quietly begins separating what appears acceptable from what appears flawed. Little habits that once seemed insignificant suddenly become impossible to ignore. The way someone eats, the promises they accidentally forget, the repeated household mistakes that once inspired laughter instead begin feeling strangely symbolic. Tiny imperfections slowly transform into emotional evidence. Instead of remaining harmless background noise, they start convincing the mind that something much larger may be wrong beneath the surface. Without realizing it, many couples have spent this entire week collecting silent disappointments. Complaints remain unspoken. Frustrations remain hidden behind polite conversations. Emotional tension continues accumulating beneath everyday interactions until it forms an invisible reservoir waiting for release. But growing emotional pressure has been expanding day after day, preparing for the exact moment when it can no longer remain contained. That moment arrives today. July 13th is not significant because of one isolated transit. It is significant because several powerful forces are converging at precisely the same time. At 10:26 in the morning, Venus forms an exact square with Uranus. This creates a precise 90-degree angle between the planet governing love and relationships, and the planet associated with sudden disruption, unexpected change, and revolutionary breakthroughs. Astrologically, a square represents friction. It represents competing energies pressing against one another until neither can comfortably continue unchanged. Compromise becomes increasingly difficult because each force demands a different direction. When the desire for emotional stability confronts an equally powerful longing for independence and freedom, the emotional atmosphere becomes highly unpredictable. Relationships may suddenly reveal truths that have remained hidden beneath the surface. Emotional reactions may arrive without warning. Long-standing patterns that appeared secure can begin shifting within moments. Yet even this powerful square is only one part of today's unfolding story. Within only a few hours after this exact aspect forms, Venus becomes involved in an even more remarkable celestial pattern known to astrologers as a yod, often referred to as the finger of God. Understanding why this rare configuration matters is essential, because it introduces an entirely new layer of intensity to everything already taking place, and in the next part, we will explore exactly how that extraordinary alignment shapes the emotional turning point that today has been preparing all along. Keep one thought firmly in your mind before we go any further. The Venus and Uranus square may be the spark that ignites today's events, but the yod is the force that allows that spark to become an uncontrollable blaze. Those two influences are unfolding immediately after one of the most emotionally revealing astrological moments of the season, the Mercury Kazimi in Cancer. That timing is not accidental. It creates a sequence in which your heart is first opened, your emotional defenses are quietly lowered, and only then does the larger wave of change arrive. Think of it as the universe removing every layer of emotional armor before asking you to confront something you have spent far too long avoiding. By the time today's energy reaches its peak, whatever happens will not simply touch the surface of your relationship. It will reach places inside you that have remained hidden for years. The emotional impact may feel surprisingly personal, because it is designed to expose what has been buried beneath ordinary routines and familiar conversations. There is purpose behind this order of events. Nothing about this progression is random or chaotic. Every stage prepares you for the next. By the end of today, 3 very specific developments involving love will have revealed themselves. Many people will struggle to explain why their emotions suddenly shifted or why circumstances changed so dramatically. They may describe it as unexpected or confusing. Yet after understanding the pattern that has been building, you will recognize that these moments, were quietly taking shape long before they became visible. Before we explore those three turning points, however, we need to return to the evening of July 12th, because everything that unfolds today begins there. The emotional chain reaction does not start with this morning. It begins during the night before. Late on July 12th, the Sun and Mercury come together in an exact conjunction while traveling through Cancer. Astrologers recognize this alignment as a Kazimi, one of the most significant conditions Mercury can experience. In that brief window, Mercury, the planet connected with thought, communication, memory, and understanding, moves directly into the heart of the Sun, receiving an extraordinary moment of illumination. Yet this particular Kazimi carries an additional layer of complexity because Mercury is still retrograde. Instead of directing your attention toward what lies ahead, its clarity turns inward, illuminating unfinished chapters from your past. Since this conjunction takes place in Cancer, the sign associated with emotional memory, family history, childhood experiences, vulnerability, and the deepest layers of the subconscious, the insights arriving tonight are likely to carry an unmistakable feeling of familiarity. They may seem ancient, almost as though they have been waiting patiently beneath the surface for exactly this moment to return. You may unexpectedly find yourself looking through photographs you have not touched in years, without understanding why they suddenly matter. A familiar melody could begin playing somewhere, instantly transporting you back to an experience that seemed completely forgotten. You might dream about someone whose name has not crossed your mind in a very long time, only to wake carrying an unexplained emotional weight that refuses to disappear. These experiences are not meaningless nostalgia. They represent the universe, carefully lifting something hidden into your conscious awareness before today's larger events unfold. Perhaps it is an emotion you pushed aside because facing it felt overwhelming. Perhaps it is a conversation that never reached its true conclusion. Perhaps it is a truth you quietly locked away because pretending it no longer mattered seemed easier than confronting its consequences. Whatever rises from within tonight deserves your complete attention because it is directly connected to what arrives the following morning. The emotional past and the unfolding future are moving toward one another, and you are standing exactly where those two timelines meet. That collision point defines the deeper meaning of today. Now we arrive at the detail that many people will overlook when discussing July 13th, even though it changes the entire interpretation of this day. Most conversations focus exclusively on the Venus and Uranus square, and while that aspect alone would already create considerable instability, it is only part of a much larger picture. Squares naturally generate conflict. They introduce friction between competing priorities and remove the comfort of remaining emotionally unchanged. They demand movement because standing still is no longer sustainable. Yet what transforms July 13th from merely powerful into something exceptionally rare is the formation of the Yod, often called the finger of God. Among astrological configurations, few carry the same level of psychological intensity or concentrated pressure. Imagine a triangle taking shape across the heavens. At its foundation stand Neptune in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius, two immense outer planets whose influence extends far beyond individual moments, quietly shaping entire generations through slow and profound transformation. Working together harmoniously, they symbolize the invisible currents driving spiritual awakening and deep structural evolution beneath the surface of everyday life. Their influence resembles powerful tectonic movement, hidden far below the ground, impossible to observe directly, yet capable of reshaping everything above. At the apex of that triangle sits Venus in Virgo, representing your relationships, your personal values, your capacity to love, and the condition of your heart. Within only 4 hours this afternoon, Venus receives exact quincunx aspects from both Neptune and Pluto at the same time. That detail is extraordinarily important because a quincunx creates a very different experience than a square. A square presents an obvious conflict, allowing you to recognize what opposes you. A quincunx offers no such clarity. It joins energies that possess no natural language for understanding one another. They cannot easily cooperate. They cannot comfortably adjust. They do not even approach reality from comparable perspectives. The experience resembles being pulled toward destinations that cannot exist on the same map. Neptune continually draws attention toward the ideal expression of love, toward spiritual connection, emotional transcendence, and the dream of what relationships could become. Pluto refuses to allow comforting illusions to survive, insisting instead that hidden motives, buried fears, struggles over control, and uncomfortable truths finally come into the light. Meanwhile, Venus in Virgo attempts to preserve stability through responsibility, careful analysis, practical effort, and relentless dedication, believing that enough work can keep everything from falling apart. Caught between Neptune's vision and Pluto's uncompromising truth, Venus absorbs pressure from both directions until maintaining the existing balance becomes impossible. That is why today's atmosphere feels far larger than an ordinary decision between staying and leaving, speaking or remaining silent, holding on or letting go. It carries the unmistakable sensation that life itself is applying pressure to every relationship built upon unstable foundations. The message moving through the sky becomes impossible to ignore. The existing pattern has reached its limit. The current structure cannot remain unchanged. Something within it must finally give way, and that realization prepares us for the next stage of the story. There are moments when life quietly removes every possible alternative until transformation is no longer optional. That is the deeper purpose of this extraordinary celestial pattern. The message carried by the finger of God is remarkably simple, yet almost impossible to ignore. The current structure cannot survive in its existing form. Something inside your emotional world has reached a point where adjustment is no longer enough. Change becomes inevitable. And the part that feels most unsettling is realizing that you are not completely in control of how that transformation unfolds. The pressure is aimed directly at the center of your relationships, your values, and your heart. That is why today feels so intensely personal. Now let us examine the 3 specific relationship turning points this rare cosmic alignment is capable of producing. These are not random possibilities or abstract symbolism. They emerge directly from the exact planetary geometry unfolding today. For many people, one of these experiences will feel so familiar that it may seem as though the heavens are describing the details of their own life. The first turning point begins with Uranus traveling through Gemini, and its arrival is far less emotional than most people would expect. Instead of exploding through a dramatic confrontation or an emotional confession in the middle of the night, it arrives through information. Facts become the catalyst. Evidence becomes impossible to ignore. Gemini governs communication, technology, conversations, digital networks, messages, and the movement of information itself. Whenever Uranus activates this sign, disruption often appears through something that can be seen, read, opened, or discovered. A message appears where it was never intended to appear. A notification flashes across an unattended screen. An email reaches the wrong recipient. A forgotten online profile unexpectedly comes into view. The revelation does not begin with emotion. Emotion follows only after undeniable evidence has already spoken for itself. Because this event unfolds immediately after the Mercury Kazimi in Cancer, and because Mercury remains retrograde, the discovery is unlikely to reveal something newly created. Instead, it uncovers something that has existed quietly beneath the surface for a very long time. Perhaps it has remained hidden for months. Perhaps it has been buried for years. Retrograde Mercury has a remarkable tendency to reopen unfinished chapters, retrieve forgotten truths, and expose information that never fully disappeared. What seemed safely locked away suddenly returns demanding recognition. The person most deeply affected by this revelation reflects the qualities of Venus in Virgo. This is someone who believes careful observation prevents unpleasant surprises. They organize every detail, anticipate every possibility, and trust that enough preparation can preserve emotional stability. They build systems because systems create certainty. Yet today's realization is not shocking simply because of what is discovered. The deeper shock comes from recognizing that the framework they trusted was incomplete from the very beginning. They believed they possessed every necessary fact, yet an entire layer of reality remained hidden beyond their awareness. It resembles studying an elaborate map only to discover an entire landscape was missing. The first reaction is rarely dramatic. Tears usually do not appear immediately, neither does anger. Instead, there is often an eerie silence as the nervous system struggles to reconcile two completely different versions of reality. For a brief moment, thought becomes suspended. The mind recognizes the truth before the heart has learned how to feel it. Emotional release arrives later. The first experience is simply the overwhelming stillness that accompanies unmistakable clarity. If you've sensed recently that something inside your relationship does not fully make sense, if an unexplainable feeling has quietly suggested that an important piece of the story remains hidden, today may finally reveal what has been missing. Not because you forced the answer into existence, but because the universe has determined that the season of uncertainty has lasted long enough. The second turning point unfolds with much less visible drama. Yet many people will discover that it leaves a far deeper emotional imprint. This story is not centered on another person's actions. Instead, it shines a light on the quiet habits you have developed inside your own heart. Venus in Virgo often expresses love through unwavering dedication. This is the partner who remembers every small preference, notices details that everyone else overlooks, searches endlessly for practical solutions, and quietly carries responsibilities before anyone else even realizes they exist. Their affection is demonstrated through consistency, thoughtful service, and dependable presence rather than dramatic declarations. Yet beneath that generosity, there often exists another reality that remains invisible to everyone except the person carrying it. Every sacrifice is remembered. Every postponed desire quietly settles beneath the surface. Every personal need placed aside for the sake of harmony becomes another entry in an invisible emotional record that no one else can see. Throughout this week, under the influence of Venus in Virgo, that silent record has continued growing heavier. It has absorbed every overlooked effort, every unnoticed kindness, every compromise accepted without acknowledgement. Eventually, even the strongest heart reaches the point where carrying more becomes impossible. That is where today's second turning point emerges. The individual who has always adjusted, always repaired problems, always anticipated everyone else's needs, suddenly reaches an internal boundary. The change is immediate rather than gradual. It does not require endless discussions or repeated warnings. From the outside, the trigger may appear almost insignificant. Someone forgets a simple responsibility. A passing remark feels unexpectedly dismissive. A criticism lands in the wrong moment. To an observer, none of these incidents seem large enough to explain the response. Yet, they do not arrive alone. They land upon years of accumulated disappointment that has never been fully expressed. The final weight is small. The burden beneath it is enormous. Uranus in Gemini introduces an uncompromising desire for liberation, and it insists that freedom can no longer wait. The caretaker quietly releases responsibilities they have carried for far too long. They stop solving every problem before someone else notices it. They no longer organize every detail. They refuse to remain responsible for maintaining the emotional balance of the entire relationship. Some may literally leave the room or walk through the door. Others remain physically present while emotionally stepping away from the role they have occupied for years. What makes this moment especially unforgettable is not explosive anger, but remarkable calm. The absence of argument often feels more unsettling than shouting ever could. It is the calm that appears when someone has finally accepted that continuing exactly as before is no longer possible, and that quiet decision becomes the beginning of an entirely different chapter. For the person standing on the opposite side of this moment, the experience can feel deeply unsettling. Overnight, the individual they believed they understood better than anyone suddenly behaves like a stranger. The quiet consistency they once relied upon disappears without warning, leaving them wondering how something that seemed so dependable could change so completely in such a short time. Only then do they realize that much of the relationship had been resting upon invisible sacrifices they never truly noticed. The question left hanging between two people is painfully direct, yet impossible to ignore. Can love continue to exist when one person is no longer willing to abandon themselves simply to keep the relationship functioning? If you have spent months, or perhaps years, carrying responsibilities that no one acknowledged, swallowing your own needs while convincing yourself everything was fine, today's astrological energy offers something it has withheld for a long time. It offers permission to release that burden. The real challenge is not whether you are allowed to set it down. The challenge is whether you are willing to discover what remains once you do. The third and final turning point reaches an even deeper emotional level because its source does not appear to come from either partner. Instead, it arrives with the unmistakable feeling that life itself has stepped into the relationship. This is the finger of God, expressing its symbolism in the clearest possible way. Neptune applies pressure from one direction, drawing Venus toward an idealized vision of love that reaches beyond routine, beyond compromise, and beyond the ordinary expectations people often accept. It quietly reminds the heart that love should nourish the soul, rather than merely sustain daily responsibilities. From the opposite direction, Pluto exerts an entirely different kind of pressure. It demands complete honesty. It refuses to tolerate hidden motives, silent power struggles, carefully maintained appearances, or emotional agreements that survive only because no one dares to question them. Its message is uncompromising. Stop presenting a version of yourself designed only to preserve harmony. Reveal what is genuinely true and allow the relationship to prove whether it can exist without illusion. Caught between these immense planetary forces, Venus in Virgo continues doing what it understands best. It organizes, plans, analyzes, improves, and works tirelessly, believing that enough dedication can solve any emotional difficulty. Yet the lesson carried by today's Yod reveals the limit of that belief. Some situations cannot be repaired through greater effort. No amount of organization, careful planning, practical reasoning, or relentless responsibility can eliminate the tension between the soul's longing for something spiritually meaningful and the psyche's demand to confront uncomfortable truth without disguise. Eventually, the existing balance becomes impossible to maintain. Something must be surrendered because the old structure no longer possesses the strength to carry both realities at once. The way this final turning point appears varies from one life to another, yet its underlying purpose remains remarkably consistent. One partner may reveal a truth so deeply hidden that it completely changes the understanding of who they are. An external event may suddenly enter the picture, whether through professional circumstances, health concerns, or the unexpected return of someone connected to the past, removing the illusion that unlimited time still exists. Whatever form it takes, the result is the same. The relationship is forced to confront the difference between its authentic reality and the comforting story that both people may have quietly accepted. Perhaps the most emotionally challenging aspect of this experience is recognizing that immediate resolution is unlikely. The nature of the quincunx does not encourage simple conclusions or perfectly satisfying explanations. Instead, many people are left sitting with uncertainty, feeling that circumstances are strangely incomplete, emotionally disorienting, and almost dreamlike, while simultaneously sensing that everything unfolding is necessary. Those who attempt to force certainty through logic alone may discover themselves growing increasingly exhausted. They continue searching for practical solutions to a situation that cannot be solved through practical thinking. The deeper invitation offered by this alignment is surrender. Not surrender as defeat, but surrender as the willingness to recognize that some transformations originate from forces larger than personal planning. Occasionally, life reorganizes everything around you, not because you made the wrong choices, but because the version of yourself that once fit inside those circumstances no longer exists. Yet the story does not end with today's emotional intensity. Less than 24 hours after the events of July 13th, the atmosphere changes once again. On July 14th, a new moon rises in Cancer, introducing an entirely different emotional current. The electrifying instability created by the Venus-Uranus square gradually softens into something quieter, more vulnerable, and profoundly human. As the initial shock begins fading and the nervous system slowly releases its heightened state, deeper emotions emerge. Grief surfaces. Longing becomes impossible to ignore. Memories return with unexpected tenderness. Many people discover a powerful desire to feel emotionally protected, to withdraw from external noise, and to seek genuine comfort after the intensity of everything they have experienced. If July 13th resembles a sudden bolt of lightning, then July 14th becomes the quiet moment afterward when the rain continues falling and you finally allow yourself to feel everything the storm uncovered. The significance of this new moon becomes even greater because it joins retrograde Mercury. Healing, therefore, does not begin by racing toward the future. It begins by returning to the past with new awareness. The disruption, initiated by Uranus, clears emotional space that allows much older wounds to become visible. Long-established childhood patterns, inherited family dynamics, and the earliest beliefs about what love was supposed to be all rise toward consciousness. The relationship crisis unfolding on July 13th was never solely about the person standing beside you. Instead, it opens the door to emotional patterns that existed long before this relationship ever began. What initially appears to be destruction gradually reveals itself as purposeful reconstruction. Something outdated is being dismantled, so something healthier can eventually take its place. The intensity of these days may understandably feel overwhelming. Part of you may already sense the impact approaching. Yet there is one truth worth remembering before everything unfolds. Whatever cannot survive under this energy was never meant to remain exactly as it has been. Only a few days later, on July 18th, Uranus forms a harmonious trine with Pluto. Unlike a square, which creates friction and demands confrontation, a trine allows energy to move naturally and with remarkable ease. Suddenly, the liberation initiated earlier aligns with authentic personal empowerment. The same changes that initially felt painful begin revealing unexpected possibilities. Those who release an unhealthy relationship or who allow an outdated version of an existing relationship to end often discover a new emotional landscape they never imagined existed. Within that space, love no longer depends upon constant self-sacrifice. Devotion no longer requires pretending to be someone else. Commitment and personal freedom become capable of supporting one another instead of competing for survival. Relationships that continue beyond this transit are unlikely to resemble their previous form. The hidden resentments, silent emotional accounting, carefully maintained appearances, and invisible compromises lose their place within the connection. What remains has the opportunity to become simpler, more truthful, and more authentic than anything built upon illusion could ever become. For relationships that come to an end, their conclusion does not represent meaningless loss. They were the very weight that needed to be released before the next chapter could begin. Today represents far more than another date on the calendar. It marks a threshold where familiar emotional patterns, unspoken agreements, daily routines, and long-established relationship dynamics begin transforming, regardless of whether anyone consciously chooses the process. The cosmos is not waiting for permission, it is inviting awareness. Therefore, when the Mercury Kazimi illuminates memories, emotions, or truths that have remained hidden, allow them to rise without resistance. There is no need to suppress them or analyze every feeling until it loses its meaning. Simply witness what emerges. Then, when today's unexpected moment arrives, whether through new information, a quiet refusal to continue carrying every burden alone, or circumstances that seem directed by fate itself, remember that endings are not always endings. Sometimes, what appears to be breaking apart is actually creating the only possible beginning. Certain structures must fall before something capable of lasting can finally be built. Beyond this period of upheaval waits another experience of love, one that asks neither for self-abandonment nor constant performance, one that no longer depends upon silent resentment or hidden emotional accounting. Today's events are not punishment. They are awakening. Once that awakening occurs, the sequence of everything unfolding begins to reveal its purpose. The finger of God continues pointing toward the place where transformation is required. The only remaining question is whether you are willing to follow its direction, even when doing so feels uncomfortable. Those who choose to face this energy with honesty instead of avoidance often discover that they emerge from the experience profoundly changed. If you have remained with this message until now, perhaps some part of you already recognizes that your own journey is asking for exactly that kind of courage. Thank you sincerely for sharing this time with me. If this message resonated with you and you would like to continue exploring these astrological insights together, I invite you to subscribe and become part of this community. I would also love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments, because your perspective may help someone else navigating the same journey. Until we meet again, take good care of yourself, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.